We now take a closer look at the president's one-month press conference with reporter Song Joo-young at the presidential office. Though the office is in Yongsan, the briefing was held at the Blue House. You covered both. Was there a noticeable difference in the atmosphere?
The venue was the same, but the mood was noticeably different. During the Moon Jae-in administration, the atmosphere resembled that of a banquet hall, with music playing even before the press conference began. Back then, the conference often included performance-like elements directed by Protocol Secretary Tak Hyun-min. This time, keeping in mind the president's extensive background as an experienced administrative officer, it felt much more like a standard press conference. The staff also appeared somewhat more rigid compared to the Moon administration. The mood seemed to affect the reporters too. Their questioning style was noticeably different. In the Moon administration, journalists vied keenly for the chance to ask questions. For that reason, some journalists opted to wear traditional Korean attire while waving distinctive dolls at the press conferences to attract more attention. Of course, competition to ask questions was still intense, but there were fewer attention-grabbing moments.
So it was a typical press conference. There were several questions during the conference. Were there any tough questions for President Lee Jae-myung?
One particularly challenging question was about anti-discrimination laws concerning specific minority groups such as sexual minorities. President Lee seemed quite flustered. Let's take a look at the scene.
I probably shouldn't have held the press conference. Thank you. The anti-discrimination law is definitely a sensitive topic.
While it seemed humorous at first, this topic presents a complex challenge for the Democratic Party of Korea, who is highly sensitive to shifting public opinions. Perhaps because of that, the president pushed the issue down the priority list, saying that revitalizing the economy and improving people's livelihoods is his top priority. He also tried to diffuse a question on balanced regional development with humor, saying, "There are regions with conflicting interests, so it's quite a tricky situation."
Yes, he handled it skillfully. After press conferences, we usually fact-check, don't we? But it was honestly quite striking that President Lee fact-checked during the press conference itself.
Yes, we saw this particularly when he was answering a question from a Japanese journalist. Let's watch that moment.
Didn't we meet once over lunch before? He's a Japanese journalist. It's hard to understand how such blatant fake news is still spreading in this day and age.
Even though the footage only depicts a fleeting interaction, the dedicated journalist tenaciously posed a series of in-depth questions, striving to uncover and reveal the underlying truth behind the misinformation being spread as fake news. This refers to a claim made during President Lee's time as Democratic Party of Korea leader, where the People Power Party's Media Special Committee accused Lee of holding a secret meeting with foreign journalists, including one from Shinhwa News Agency. This appears to show the president's desire to correct this matter. This reflects his characteristic of responding quickly to public opinion and the media.
Yes, and the president also mentioned his past as a boy laborer. What did he say about it?
When the question about the 45-hour workweek came up, he referenced his own time as a teenage factory worker, creating a sense of empathy while answering. Listen to what he said.
When I was young and working in a factory, I didn't get any days off for an entire month. At first, that's how it was. Then one day, they started giving us one day off a month.
While expressing that he had experienced it himself and empathized with the necessity, the president responded by saying, "I want to implement it as quickly as possible, but it's hard to specify a timeline."
There were a variety of questions and answers this time, but the president seemed to focus especially on balanced regional development. Did something stand out in particular?
Yeah, maybe it's because they picked questioners by lottery. This press conference used a combination of business card drawings and the president personally selecting reporters. Boxes were placed for each of the three categories: livelihood and economy, politics and diplomacy, and social affairs, and reporters dropped their business cards into the relevant one. Then, without any prior notice or pre-arranged questions, names were drawn randomly for questioning. The intention was to highlight fairness and equitable treatment, likely in response to ongoing criticisms of the pre-coordinated questions that characterized the Park Geun-hye administration. As a result, the opportunity to ask questions wasn't evenly distributed among daily newspapers, broadcasters, and economic media. Since many of the questions came from regional outlets, the issue you mentioned naturally received more attention. Among the reporters covering the event, there have been calls for improvements.
Since they've announced multiple conferences, we'll keep an eye on the improvements. Thank you, Song Joo-young from the presidential office.